He showed up alone, no rank, no ribbons, just a folded letter and a jacket older than most of the people walking past him. What secret did that letter hold? They told him to wait by the wall, didn't scan his name, didn't ask who he was. To them, he was just another old man, but behind that quiet posture was a soldier who had once led men through missions the government didn't speak of. What shocking truth would a four-star general reveal? And when the four-star general he once saved realized he'd been left outside, one phone call was made to the Pentagon, and everything stopped. What happened next? You'll never forget. Welcome to Graceful Valor Stories, where tales of compassion and kindness are told. Let's uncover what really happened. Sir, I'm going to need you to step to the side. This is a secure perimeter. The voice came from a young army captain, polite, professional, and rehearsed. He wasn't trying to be rude, just doing his job. The line was long, the scanners were humming, and the last thing he needed was an unknown guest holding things up. The old man in front of him didn't argue, he simply stepped back, 2 quiet steps, and took his place near the cold marble wall, folding his letter back into the inside pocket of his jacket. The crowd continued moving past him. No one looked twice. The Pentagon's visitor center auditorium was buzzing with preparation. It was recognition day for emerging military leaders, a by-invitation ceremony honoring promising young officers from across all service branches, the kind of event that drew stars on shoulders, sharp uniforms, and speeches that got remembered, the kind of event where you were either expected or invisible. Henry Maddox was not on the expected list. He had shown up early, long before the guests began filing in, and dressed modestly, pressed khaki trousers, a pale button-down shirt, and a brown leather bomber jacket with worn cuffs and a tear at the shoulder that had been stitched years ago by hand. He didn't wear ribbons, he didn't need to. He had laced up polished but scuffed leather shoes, the soles worn thin from decades of use. In one hand he held a folded envelope, yellowed at the corners. Inside it, a handwritten letter bearing the official seal of the Department of Defense. The signature at the bottom read General Avery Cole. The letter wasn't an RSVP request, it was a personal invitation, but none of that mattered to Captain Jake Weston. Weston was the officer in charge of verifying arrivals. His iPad displayed a clean, alphabetized list of names, each matched with a digital credential, a photo, a QR code, and a security clearance level. There was no Maddox Henry anywhere, no badge, no scan, no record. So Weston had followed protocol. He'd apologized with formal courtesy, told the elderly man he must have received an outdated invite, and asked him to wait outside the entry line just until we can verify. 30 minutes had passed since then. Weston had moved on. Henry hadn't. The wind was sharper near the wall. It swept in quietly from the side quarter, sneaking past Henry's collar. He didn't move. His spine was straight, hands at his sides, eyes calm, but searching. He stood like a man used to waiting. Some of the guests noticed him. They just didn't think he belonged. A young lieutenant in a dress uniform whispered something to the man beside him. Both chuckled. Facility support probably, or VA outreach. Henry heard it, didn't blink. He'd been called worse, and anyway, they weren't entirely wrong. He did spend his mornings sweeping the floor and straightening chairs at a local veterans center, 3 days a week. Voluntarily, no one had asked him to. He just showed up and did the work. No name tag, no recognition, just quiet hands in an old jacket. The security line flowed forward, dozens of polished shoes, dozens of stars, bars, and ribbons. Nobody glanced back, nobody asked why he hadn't moved. Henry kept his eyes forward. Through the glass doors, he could see the edges of the auditorium foyer. Banners hung from the rafters, honoring the next generation of service. He didn't resent them, he just wasn't sure if they remembered there was a generation before him. A few feet away, Naomi Perez, a civilian intern, stood at the program table, flipping through folders. She glanced up, saw the old man near the wall. She'd seen him when she arrived, figured he was with logistics or catering, but something about the way he stood, she couldn't stop looking. He wasn't lost, wasn't working, wasn't begging for entry. He was waiting, and in his stillness, there was purpose. Naomi made a step toward him, but Captain Weston intercepted. "Hey," Weston said, nodding toward her clipboard, "we need the seating assignments finalized before General Cole arrives. Don't worry about that guy. Security's aware, he's not cleared." Naomi hesitated. "Did he say who invited him?" Weston shrugged. "Had a letter, no barcode, old paper, nothing official, but he's still standing there." "Then he's patient." Weston turned away, and Naomi looked back at the man by the wall. He hadn't moved. Back outside the line, Henry shifted his feet slightly. His hip ached, but he wouldn't sit, not yet. He watched the line shrink, watched the staff usher in the last few VIPs, watched 3 junior officers laugh at something on a phone. He reached into his jacket, pulled out the letter again. It was worn now, creased where his thumb had pressed too hard. He read the top line for the 6th time that morning. "Mr. Maddox, your presence at this year's ceremony would be an honor to me personally. General Avery Cole." Henry folded it again and waited. Inside the auditorium, The MC stepped onto the stage, a spotlight followed him. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, thank you for joining us on this special day of recognition and pride. Today we celebrate the future of our armed forces. Applause followed. Rows of young officers straightened their backs, cameras flashed, a Marine band played softly near the rear of the room, somewhere in the third row. General Cole's aide leaned forward and whispered, still no visual on Mr. Maddox. General Cole turned slightly, brows drawn, eyes sharp. He scanned the room once, then again, his jaw tightened. He turned to his aide. Where is he, sir? Henry Maddox, gray hair, bomber jacket, walks with a limp. I invited him. The aide tapped at his tablet. Not in the seating log. We assumed he hadn't arrived. General Cole looked toward the auditorium doors. He didn't speak for several seconds, then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he's here, or he was. He stood and stepped into the shadows, back at the entry quarter. Henry glanced at his watch. He hadn't come to make a statement, he came because of a letter, a memory, a promise, and because the man who'd signed that letter had once been a 19-year-old second lieutenant lying in a ditch halfway around the world, bleeding into the dust, whispering the name of a mother he thought he'd never see again. Henry hadn't said much then, he hadn't needed to, he just lifted the boy across his shoulders and walked. Now, that boy was a general, and Henry, just the man by the wall. The minutes passed like mist curling off stone. Henry Maddox had now been standing near the sidewall of the Pentagon Visitor Center for nearly 40 minutes. He didn't complain, he didn't even shift his weight much, but the cold had crept in through the polished tile floor, snaking up through his shoes, curling around his knees. The autumn air moving through the building's ventilation ducts had a bite to it, especially in quiet corners, but he stayed, because sometimes staying put was its own form of dignity. A security guard on the far end of the hall gave him a second look. The guard was older than most of the staff, gray at the temples, eyes tired, but sharper than they looked. He nudged a colleague and murmured, that guy looks familiar. The younger guard shrugged, somebody's uncle, maybe logistics. The older man squinted again, something stirred in his memory, a grainy photo at the VA clinic bulletin board, a plaque tucked away in a hallway nobody used, a name Maddox, but he wasn't sure, and in places like this, not sure wasn't enough, so he let the moment pass. Henry considered leaving, he really did. His hip was stiff, and the silence around him wasn't just cold, it was echoing. But as he shifted slightly, ready to ease away from the wall, his eyes caught something just inside the foyer, a banner mounted cleanly above the inner hallway. It read, Operation Dustlight Exhibit, Classified Heroes of the 20th Century. Henry stopped dead still, his gaze locked on the words like they had reached back and grabbed something deep inside him. He stepped slightly to the right. The glare on the glass case just beyond the entry doors broke, and there it was, the map, a detailed military terrain schematic etched on parchment, yellowed with time, tactical zones, waypoints, extraction lines. He didn't need to read the caption, he remembered every line, every bend of the ravine, every escape route, every name scratched into the margins. He didn't need the exhibit, he had lived it. 1972, northern Syria. It had been just past midnight when the ambush started. They were 12 men deep in enemy territory, no air cover, no comms, and no second chances. The mission had been simple, locate and retrieve a rogue weapons developer hiding in a remote canyon compound, but nothing ever stayed simple in the field, not for long. Halfway into the gorge, the extraction point went hot, gunfire erupted from both ridge lines, screams, shrapnel, flashbangs that lit up the inside of Henry's skull. He'd been the officer in charge, Lieutenant Colonel Henry Maddox, leading a team of elite operatives whose names never made it onto any official roster, names that still didn't exist on paper. They weren't supposed to be there, which meant they weren't supposed to die there either. He remembered rolling into cover behind a shattered boulder, grabbing the combat radio off a dead comms tech and trying to reach air support that wasn't coming. Then he heard it, a scream, sharp. Panicked, he turned and saw him, Private First Class Avery Cole, young, barely 20, bleeding heavily from a graze to the abdomen, pinned near the extraction marker, shaking and half-conscious. Maddox didn't hesitate, he ran through open fire, grabbed the kid by the vest, hauled him across the rocks, took a bullet through the edge of his boot, and kept moving. He pulled Cole into the fallback trench, shoved a field tourniquet into the boy's trembling hands, and hissed through his teeth, hold this, don't look up, and don't stop breathing. He held the line for 3 more hours, then got all 12 men out. Only 3 could walk, he carried 2 of the others. He never filed a medal report, there was no after-action briefing, there was no public record of the mission, only the dust and silence. Back in the present, Henry blinked away the memory like someone brushing snow from his shoulders. The glass case stared back at him. They'd written about Operation Dustlight, now safely sanitized years after declassification, stripped of the panic and the blood and the cold nights where you slept with one eye open because dreams got people killed, and the names still redacted. The story was told, but the men were still ghosts. Behind him, a quiet voice broke through. Sir, are you lost? Henry turned his head slightly. It was the intern from earlier, Naomi Perez. She approached cautiously, respectfully, not patronizing, not performative, just human. You've been standing here for a long time, she said softly. Can I help you find someone? Henry offered a faint smile, just waiting. Naomi glanced at the letter in his hand. Is that an invitation? Henry nodded. She tilted her head. I don't think I've seen you on any list. But before she could finish, a uniformed officer strode up from behind a young, eager, confident, in all the wrong ways of Perez. He said curtly, you don't need to worry about him, he's with maintenance. Naomi frowned. He has a letter signed by General Cole. Okay. The officer cut in, but he's not credentialed, we've already been over it. Security flagged it. You've got assignments, let's move. Naomi hesitated. The officer turned and walked off without another word. Henry didn't say anything, he just gave Naomi a small nod. It's all right, ma'am, but it wasn't. Inside the auditorium, the ceremony moved forward, one speaker after another, tributes, laughter, polite applause. A young captain recited a speech about innovation and courage, a colonel accepted a plaque on behalf of his unit, and General Cole still hadn't entered the room. Backstage, his aide was checking his phone nervously. Naomi stood nearby now, eyes darting between the hallway and the doors. She couldn't shake the feeling in her chest, the way the man's voice had sounded, worn, weathered, but grounded, like someone who'd carried something heavy for too long and had gotten used to it. Back in the corridor, Henry let out a slow breath. He looked at the envelope again. It didn't say special guest, didn't offer a reserved seat or security clearance. It just said, I would be honored if you came. Maybe that didn't mean anything anymore. Maybe the man who wrote it had moved on to people do. But Henry hadn't come for himself. He came because part of him needed to know, was there still a place in the army for men like him, men who didn't speak, didn't write books, didn't ask to be remembered, just men who once carried others out of burning valleys and never said a word about it. He was about to turn away. He'd made peace with being overlooked, he always had, but then the doors at the end of the corridor opened, and everything changed. The music faded, lights dimmed, and General Avery Cole stepped onto the stage. He moved with the bearing of a man who had spent 40 years in uniform, not stiff, not arrogant, just solid, every step purposeful, every glance deliberate. The audience rose briefly in polite applause. He acknowledged them with a nod, no wave, no smile, and made his way to the center of the platform. Behind him, a banner unfurled from the ceiling. Emerging Military Leaders Recognition Ceremony. A sea of decorated officers, civilian guests, foreign attaches, and uniformed cadets filled the auditorium. But General Cole wasn't looking at them, he was looking for someone else. His eyes scanned the front row, then the second, then to the back. His expression didn't change, but something in his shoulders shifted. A pause, a wrinkle of concern across his brow. He turned slightly, spoke to no one in particular. Where is he? He stepped back from the podium, eyes narrowing, then he motioned sharply to one of his aides standing near the side curtain. A young lieutenant jogged up. Sir. Cole's voice was low, controlled, but behind it an unmistakable edge. There should be an elderly man here. Gray hair, bomber jacket, walks with a limp. He was supposed to be here. He's why I came. The aide blinked, caught off guard. Name, sir, Henry Maddox. The aide pulled out his tablet, began tapping furiously. No one by that name was issued a formal credential, no clearance issued, no seating record, nothing logged. Cole's face hardened. Check security. Yes, sir. The aide stepped away, whispered into a comms mic. Seconds passed, then he returned, pale. Sir, security reports a man matching that description was stopped near the south gate, no badge, dressed informally. They told him to stand aside. He hesitated, then added, they assumed he was with facility support. Cole's eyes snapped toward him. He didn't speak, didn't blink. Then with measured precision, he reached into the inner pocket of his uniform jacket and pulled out his encrypted government phone. He turned his back to the stage, dialed. The room continued as if nothing had changed, but everything had. The call went directly to the Directorate of Military Honors and Records at the Pentagon, an internal division tasked with oversight of classified personnel recognitions and clearances. The line picked up on the first ring. This is General Cole, he said calmly. I need immediate clearance. Override on one. Henry Maddox. Full recognition protocol. A pause. Yes, Lieutenant Colonel. Retired. Yes. Operation Dustlight. He was cleared for attendance by personal invitation. Security turned him away. Another pause. No, I'm not requesting it, I'm activating it. Effective immediately. Issue digital validation and route it to all auditorium control posts and hold the program. I'm going to get him myself. He hung up. Inside the auditorium, the MC was announcing the next honoree. A young Navy officer stood to receive a plaque. General Cole didn't wait. He stepped off the stage, walked briskly down the side aisle, and made straight for the exit. His aide tried to follow. Cole waved him off. I said, I'm going down at the south gate. The breeze had picked up. Henry Maddox was preparing to leave. The ache in his hip had deepened, and the hollow weight in his chest was now heavier than any combat load he'd carried. He didn't regret coming, but part of him regretted believing. Just as he turned toward the exit, the outer doors opened behind him. Bootsteps echoed, quick, sharp, and then a voice. Colonel Maddox. Henry turned. There he was, General Avery Cole. No microphone, no cameras, no entourage, just him, and the look in his eyes wasn't polite, it wasn't formal, it was something older than rank. Older than ceremony, it was the look of a man who had been carried out of a burning canyon and had never forgotten the hands. "That pulled him to safety, sir," Cole said, stopping in front of him. "You were supposed to be inside." Henry didn't answer. He didn't know how. Cole straightened, and then before anyone could speak, he raised his right hand and saluted, a full, crisp military salute right there in the hallway with soldiers watching. The aide at the checkpoint stared, frozen. The younger officers nearby went dead quiet. Henry, caught off guard, stood taller than he had in years, and returned the salute. His hand trembled, but the motion was clean, sharp, unmistakable. Cole dropped his hand. "I invited you to be part of this ceremony," he said softly, "not as a guest, as the reason it exists." Henry blinked. "Sir, no," Cole interrupted. "I owe you more than words. Come with me." He turned, held the door open. Henry hesitated, then followed. Inside the auditorium, whispers began to ripple across the room, phones vibrated, aides murmured to their superiors. Then the doors at the rear of the auditorium opened wide, and every head turned. General Cole walked down the center aisle, not alone. Beside him, an old man in a bomber jacket, shoulders back, chin up, eyes clear. Whispers stopped. The MC stammered mid-sentence. A colonel halfway through clapping froze in place. General Cole stepped back onto the stage, guiding Henry gently beside him. He took the microphone, didn't read from a script, didn't thank the crowd, didn't even reintroduce himself. He just looked out over the rows of faces and said, "Before I continue this program, I need to correct something that should have never happened in this building." He looked down at Henry, then back at the crowd. "This man standing beside me is Lieutenant Colonel Henry Maddox, retired, U.S. Army Special Operations 1971 to 1986, recipient of multiple classified honors, commander of Task Force Dustlight." Gasps audible. One man's jaw visibly dropped. A young Marine stood to his feet out of instinct, then sat back down. General Cole went on, "In 1972, I was a 19-year-old private. I was wounded, bleeding out, pinned under fire with no comms, no cover, and no future. This man carried me out, carried 2 others while wounded himself, then refused evacuation until all 12 of his men were accounted for." He looked at Henry again, his voice cracked just once. "He saved my life, and today we left him standing outside this auditorium." No one moved, no one breathed. Cole straightened. "I asked him to come here so I could say on record that the army I serve in today still remembers the ones who never asked to be remembered." He stepped aside, turned to Henry. "Sir, would you honor us by taking your place on this stage?" Henry looked out at the crowd. He didn't see judgment, he saw faces, human, young, grateful. He nodded once, took a step forward, then another. The MC, barely keeping it together, approached the podium again, cleared his throat. "I believe, ladies and gentlemen, we have a new first honoree for tonight's ceremony." Applause broke, at first quiet, then rising and rising until the walls of the Pentagon auditorium shook, not from power, but from recognition. In our darkest moments, kindness still finds a way, often in the quietest places. Not everyone who helps wants recognition. Some just need to know that today someone isn't going hungry, and sometimes that alone is enough to change a life. You may forget the story, but if no one retells it, history stays silent forever. Subscribe to Graceful Valor Stories, where justice is honored, kindness is remembered, and no act of quiet heroism is ever lost.